to move from that, thank you for your inputs, to looking at some examples of what this actually does look like, the how of it. Kirsten and Liz have really spoken about why, and really the how is, I guess, the important thing in terms of action. So let me introduce Jill, who is from YouthLink Scotland, who is going to speak about the Natural Leaders Programme, which is a 2-year programme still underway, and what that means in terms of learning for sustainability practice. Jill, over to you.
Thanks, Betsy. So I work in the Youth Work and Schools Partnerships team within YouthLink Scotland, and this Natural Leaders Programme came really through my involvement in, Kirsten, if you can move on to the next slide, that'd be great. In the Outdoor Education Recovery Fund, which came kind of post-COVID, which feels like a gazillion years ago now, but was a really important piece of work because it was a targeted piece of work looking at partnerships between youth work and school, and targeting young people who had been most adversely affected by the pandemic and were at risk of disengaging from education. And it was a really fantastic example of where, you know, different settings across different youth work settings across Scotland being able to have a really significant impact on things like young people's health and well-being, their skills development, their readiness to learn, and how that kind of translated on into school. And so I wanted to explore how we could do more of that, and that's really where the Natural Leaders Programme began. So if we can move on to the next slide. What we developed, and there were a number of partners involved in this, was something that we wanted to be quite systemic in its approach. So it was really about strengthening local networks to support learning for sustainability in a range of different ways. So first and foremost, it was about using that youth work expertise to co-design really engaging learning experiences with young people who perhaps hadn't had much involvement in learning for sustainability or outdoor learning, or certainly didn't have necessarily an interest in natural heritage before they began their involvement in the programme. And it was about sort of supporting youth workers to build their skills to run more of those experiences, but also to work in partnership with natural heritage partners. So we worked with some national and some local natural heritage partners to offer young people some new experiences and some new settings for learning through the programme as well. And really importantly, as we move through the programme, and as Betsy said, it's still in progress, it's giving young people an opportunity to inform new approaches to youth participation in natural heritage, particularly new audiences of young people who are not engaged yet. So we can move on to the next slide. So really quickly, it was very much a collaboration. So YouthLink Scotland facilitated, but there were 3 youth work teams at the heart of it in North Lanarkshire, West Lothian and Perth and Kinross. We had national natural heritage partners in RSPB and John Muir Trust, and Learning for Sustainability Scotland also supporting us, particularly now as we're beginning to kind of share evidence going forward. And each of the youth work teams connected with local heritage partners as well, and we had a range of funders involved. So Kirsten, if we can move on, that'd be great. So what the programme looks like is it sits in 3 communities of multiple deprivation, and in each community the youth workers, and sometimes the youth workers and young people together, have chosen a local green space, and they've had different reasons for doing that, but all of them have chosen green spaces that the young people already enjoy spending time in or have easy access to. Over the course of the programme, we'll have, so far we've had 4 schools, 48 young people and a number of natural heritage partners involved, and it kind of runs over 3 phases. So what the young people experience is, first of all, an opportunity to build connections to nature. So we don't start with an assumption that young people are going to intrinsically find this fascinating. It's very much a kind of youth work approach to kind of starting where young people are at, finding what they're interested in, and then offering them a range of different kind of hands-on experiences so that they get excited about their local green spaces and what it might be possible to do there. And then they begin to plan for some action that they want to take themselves in their local communities, and then get actively involved in making it happen, and in some cases engaging other people in helping to make it happen as well. So we can move on. I suppose really importantly, I think the youth work approach is really key here. So what makes it work is that youth workers bring their really engaging relational approach, and they start from where young people are. And also they've got a really strong connection to their own local communities and their local green spaces. I suppose naturally those youth work teams, or the people in the youth work teams that naturally kind of came forward and wanted to get involved in this programme, had some experience of facilitating outdoor learning, but they weren't necessarily outdoor learning experts by any means. And they brought a lot of creativity and fun, as you'd expect, and also a huge amount of flexibility. I think we've learned some stuff in year 1 of the programme as well, and one of the things that youth workers have been brilliant at is kind of flexing in response to, I suppose, what we're learning and some of the challenges that we've come across. And as always, that kind of natural, that kind of idea of partnership in learning, a curiosity to learn with young people, and a willingness to collaborate with new partners. So, Kirsten, we can move on. I think there have been some challenges. So it's quite interesting, something that is labelled as, it was funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and so it had a kind of natural heritage label, if you like, and I think that was a bit off-putting to youth workers initially, as you can see from the quotes there. So I think this year's been to some extent about demystifying what we mean by heritage expertise. It's not about facts and fact finding. It's about building connection to nature. I think we're tweaking as we go along the role of natural heritage partners, and that's partly because there's been some really good, robust feedback, which is part of this sort of systemic approach, about the formality of some of the approaches that the natural heritage partners were coming in with. But it was also to do with the nature of the young people that we're working with, who built very strong relationships with the youth workers, and then maybe didn't find it quite so easy when new adults would come into programmes to work with them. And just so, I guess, alongside of that, the importance of that learning exchange, respecting the kind of knowledge and the expertise that each of the partners bring in the process. We can move on to the next one. So really importantly, in the first year of the programme, the young people who have participated in the programme were kind of reflected really positively on their experience, on the experience of being out in the classroom, on the experience of being in a new group, on the experience of being able to visit new places. In fact, they were kind of asking us to offer them more of that next year. And just from the feedback, this very strong sense of connection to their local green spaces. We can move on to the next one, Kirsten. We use the National Youth Work Outcomes and Skills Framework as a way of considering impact on the programme. So if we can move on to the next slide, you can see in a bit more detail how that looks. So we picked, so when I say we, it was really the youth work teams in the local authorities worked together to come up with this kind of set of things that they were going to measure. So they looked at particular youth work outcomes, a number of skills, and then some indicators that they were going to measure through the programme. And some of those come from the National Youth Work Outcomes and Skills Framework, but we also wanted to look at some outcomes that were a bit more connected, certainly in terms of language and so on, to the Scottish Attainment Challenge, because we wanted to kind of hear from schools and from young people how this was impacting on learning back in school as well as kind of learning with youth workers. And then really importantly, also kind of looking at connections to nature and how young people felt about their local community and their local green spaces. And if the next couple of slides just give you a sense of some of the impacts that we're seeing. So young people saying that they're building a number of skills and confidence to participate in new learning opportunities and experiences. They're feeling more confident to speak up and to influence change and to believe that they can make a change in their local communities. And they notice kind of change in their own behaviours to some extent and to the way that they feel. Partly as a result of coming along to the programme and building relationships with those who are involved. And we can move on to the next one now, thank you. And really interesting kind of response, really positive response from the school partners who I think would say that they were almost surprised by the level of engagement that young people on the programme were demonstrating, but also the difference that it was making to them and or certainly to some of them as they came back into school, and how that's kind of improved engagement in learning. And I think also importantly, the fact that it's embedded within communities and connected to local youth work teams who are not going anywhere means that some of those trusted adult relationships that young people are forming will support their transition from primary to secondary. So we're working with primary 6 and 7, and this was kind of being offered as a kind of enhanced transition approach. So beyond the programme, a really strong sense that those relationships with youth workers and access to other youth work opportunities will be possible as a result of the programme. And I think there might be one more slide. Yes, so just in terms of kind of looking forward, I think we've learned a lot from this year. I think there's the confidence that the youth work teams have got going into year 2 is like palpable. They're just off and running with it this year. We understand, I think, the better that natural heritage doesn't mean being a subject expert. It's about how do you support young people in a youth work way to build connections to nature, and 1 or 2 wee tweaks with how we're working with natural heritage partners. And I guess the big question for us now is how do we take something that's working well in 3 local authorities more broadly? And I guess that's the other kind of big question for us this year. Thank you.
That's absolutely fantastic, Jill. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I think there's so much rich learning in there, and that you are in year 2. I think a fantastic experience and so much evidence of that. So thank you for sharing.